Dad always used to say the only causes worth fighting for were the lost causes.
The Senator yield. No, sir, I will not yield.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
You're listening to a Pyrolitical Pyrocast. Welcome to the Pyrolitical Pyrocast. I'm Randall.
And I'm Thomas. Hey, we want to thank you for tuning in tonight. We got some great topics for you on deck. Randall, give us a rundown.
A rundown? Well, we're going to talk, as usual, we like to talk about lands issues, especially in Utah and out west. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We'll probably talk about Comey. I mean, that's like everyone wants to talk about Comey.
And the Russians.
And the Russians. We're going to talk about obesity. We're going to talk about gender neutrality, equality, spontaneity, whatever you want to call it. We got a few things to talk about tonight. It's going to be fun.
It
Welcome
truly
along
sounds
for the
like
ride.
a fat show. A fat show. We can't really say cisgenders anymore, can we? Anyway, before we get into this, we want to invite you to go over to YouTube and subscribe to our channel, Pyrolitical Live. And that way you can get in on the conversation.
Heck yeah.
We have about 15, 16 episodes of the Pyrocast we've been doing all year long. So go in and get that goodness. There's a lot of meat for you every week. We talk about, well, let's get into it, Randall. Let's not talk about getting into it. Let's actually do that.
Let's meet it.
Well, we decided to be cliche like the mainstream media, and we are going to talk about the former director of the FBI, James Comey, who was fired because everybody hates him.
Basically.
Well, Randall, we looked at an interview with Rand Paul. Rand Paul was talking about how the Democrats are pushing a huge myth about Trump collusion with Russia. I don't know what you think, Randall, but I don't care about Russia, and I think Russians have tried to influence and infiltrate every election since the Cold War began.
Oh, before.
I don't think it matters.
Yeah, it's like it's just part of life. I mean, how many elections do you think the U.S. State Department is involved in overseas in some way or another, trying to influence, gain some support or control? Because it's just part of the game. Everyone tries to get involved everywhere because everyone feels like their interests are at stake. So understandable.
Well, it is. And let's just, I guess, give a little more background. As we said, the former director of the FBI, James Comey, has been in office while Trump's been serving as president for, several weeks now. And people said it was a little suspicious that he got fired now instead of right when Trump came into office. As you know, Trump has been accused by the mainstream media and by many pundits of being tied to Russia. And it did turn out that there were several players in the administration that had communications and connections with Russian officials. Most notably was someone in the military, name's escaping me, but he was let go because he had a deal with the Russians and was given speeches where he got paid $50,000. So obviously he had some ties there. And so that's proven because the guy was fired and it was public. However, there hasn't been anything concrete that's been tied to Trump himself. And so anyway, I guess Trump just got sick of the director, and his spokesperson said it was due to the many atrocities that were committed by the director while he was over the FBI. So that was the one thing, Randall, I noticed about the word atrocity is that when Trump's speakers, or when he tweets, they say things that are very unpresidential. Like you never know what will come out of his mouth, and it just kind of makes me scratch my head. But we do feel like the federal government's already a waste of everything anyway, so it doesn't matter. It's just kind of funny when you fire someone to say it's due to atrocities that they committed. I'm like, who says that?
Right.
You ever been fired at the
Atrocities?
bosses? Well, due to the many atrocities you committed on the job, you've got to go. And then they had some awkward, it wasn't a ceremony, but a big meeting, and all the Joint Chiefs of Staff and all these leaders were standing around, and he's shaking their hands. I'm like, oh, that's awkward.
Appalling or atrocious condition, quality, or behavior, monstrousness. Anyway, there's the definition. I don't think that this applies in this case. I mean, especially the way we connotate it in general life. You know, we talk about the gas chambers in Nazi Germany. That was an atrocity.
Yeah.
You know, some mistakes at the FBI, not necessarily an atrocity, maybe a big fat mess, sure, but atrocity, please. No.
Just the things that the FBI has been responsible for doing to the American people and around the world. Those would be atrocities, or helping to bring atrocities about. But this is silly.
That's one of the things that Rand Paul pointed out. He's like, he never liked Comey. And one of the reasons was because he was less concerned with trying to, take care of things within his regular jurisdiction. It was more trying to go in there and take away your rights and liberties, wiretapping, getting access to your personal information online, whatever that is. No, come on. I mean, that seems like the low-hanging fruit. All the different agencies want access to that information, but the actionable information, I mean, with that deluge, I think we can use deluge in the context of information on the information superhighway.
This deluge is an atrocity.
Yes, it is. And, everybody wants access to it.
Right.
Everybody wants access to it. But, really, how many people have been, or terrorists, I think we should specify, how many terrorists have been picked up and prosecuted and found guilty because of the metadata that they've been collecting on every American in the United States and overseas? I don't think we've got a single case, do we?
Well, here's the deal. If you're wondering how many terrorists have been foiled and plots by the U.S. government, you have to say, wait, let's change the way we look at that. How many terrorists have been paid by the U.S. government, and how many people have been wiretapped to keep them quiet in the U.S.? How many Americans have been wiretapped? So I think here's some of the hypocrisy of this then. Senator Rand Paul did point out that the wiretapping of Americans and the collection of their data is a far bigger issue than worrying about Russia with Trump or even Senator Clinton's emails. Right. That is the big problem, like you're saying. And the thing that's so hypocritical is U.S. Senate Minority Leader Chuck the Schmuck Schumer. I'm sorry, that's immature. But, man, that guy makes my skin crawl. I'm sorry. He looks like the quintessential slimy New York politician. But anyway, he was on the floor berating Comey months ago because Comey was being public about Hillary Clinton's email server issues. And now he's on the floor on May 10th, today, condemning that Comey was fired. Yet a few months ago, it was the exact opposite. And so when it doesn't serve their party and their team's side, then they hate it. But when it does, they're just fine with it.
They are completely duplicitous.
Duplicitous. You got all the good words.
I got a dictionary in front of me. I'll just keep looking up words.
No, way to go.
They are.
We have the words.
We have the best words
and the meats. Go ahead.
But that's what happens. It's all about political expediency. It's about political points. So on the one hand, Schumer was all up in arms about, and all his cohorts on Capitol Hill were all up in arms about the email scandal. And, Comey coming out one time after another with, hey, we might have some more information that could implicate Hillary Clinton, and having that press release the day before the election or a major poll or whatever. I mean, it did feel like Comey was really planning those to try and have political emphasis with the press releases. They were less about the emails and more about what people would hear and do as a result. And sure. not that I think Hillary Clinton is without blemish. I think she's probably got plenty of stuff hiding on her email server.
Oh yeah,
but
Clinton is as dirty as they come.
But so on that side, all the Democrats were saying he's an awful guy. We need to get rid of him. And now, why are we getting rid of him now? Because he's going to find something about Russia. Well, if you really thought that he was in Trump's camp, helping with the emails, trying to help get him elected, then why would you think that he's on the verge of some revelations about Trump and that's why he's getting canned now? Because if he was in Trump's camp, then why would he even think about doing that?
Well, here's the big crux of this matter as well. Hillary Clinton, in her first speech since the election just this past week, she came out and said, because of WikiLeaks and because of the Russians' activity and their tie to Trump, roughly speaking, this was the reason that she lost the election. And the thing that just baffles my mind is the American people are just as separated or duplicitous as the politicians are when it comes to not seeing what they should see. I mean, we see the thing that we align with on the right. The left sees the things on the left through the power structure. And it's like there has been no iota that Trump has actually had anything to do with Russia as far as the election goes. I don't think the WikiLeaks dumping of the Democratic Party's documents did anything. I've never met anyone in the last 2 years who didn't know they were voting Republican or Democrat. That's how segregated we are as a nation politically. So for her to come out and say, I would be president, which is what she said, if it wasn't for this, and that we need to investigate it, it's like, oh, you're for justice. You're for the truth to shine. But what about all your emails that you were too stupid to have another device, or that you were too stupid to not know you weren't supposed to have a server at home? It's like, we don't buy that. You're one of the most adept, one of the most accomplished politicians of all time.
You don't stay in the game.
You're surrounded by slime. I mean, if you look at the Clinton Global Initiative, I watched several documentaries about the initiative, and it was unreal the amount of corruption and deals that were paid to people around the world through the Global Initiative. I mean, you even had thousands of Haitians that showed up to protest her speaking in New York. That's how bad the people in Haiti hate the Clintons. So we know that she's a criminal. We know that she's a globalist. But the fact that she's outraged that she could have lost the election because of this, there is nobody that was going to vote for Clinton before the email leak that didn't vote for her afterwards.
Yeah, well, your standard voting bloc that votes, traditionally Republican, they've been trained, taught, and educated by Fox News and other outlets that, groups like WikiLeaks or Edward Snowden or whatever that would reveal anything detrimental to the power structure in Washington, D.C. are necessarily terrorist acts. They're outside the realm of normalcy, and they should be ignored, and don't pay attention to these. So I don't think it really, like you said, I don't think it really had that big of an effect. It didn't change the polls. It didn't change the way people were going to vote. It just didn't. It didn't. And Hillary Clinton's up in the night. She's got delusions of grandeur. That's all.
Well, I think you had a tiny sliver of Democrats which might have voted for Johnson over Clinton that were supporting Bernie, but Johnson I think he was a hidden candidate. I think he was the Manchurian candidate. I think he was just there to draw away. Yeah, I do. Because he was a mess. By the time the election happened, he had said so many things that were just like, you're not a libertarian. Sorry. I know your history showed as a state leader, but by the time he got there, I just felt like he was compromised. But maybe that's just me.
I think
but I still don't think I don't think it had any difference. Like, those who voted for Hillary were going to vote for her if Bernie wasn't there. So to me, it's just silly. Nobody's buying it. Hillary would have been voted. Well, here's the deal. She got millions of more votes too in the popular election. So she doesn't have anything to complain about. It's just that the Electoral College was a lot more strategically gerrymandered for the Republicans. So it wouldn't have made any difference in my view. So anyway, anything else we want to say on Comey?
Well, just I think it's probably time for him to be replaced. I hope, cross my fingers here, that whoever Trump sends in as a replacement is someone who is more concerned about our individual liberties than he is than Comey and previous directors have been. I mean, because that's where we really lack, is protection of those individual liberties. And,
well, there's a few of them they've named. Sorry, I cut you off there. And
that's okay. That's part of the show.
I was just going to say the people that they're considering is the FBI director, acting FBI director Andrew McCabe, which is probably what's going to happen. Assistant Director Paul Abate, Chicago FBI agent Michael Anderson, or Richmond, Virginia agent Adam Lee. And so I don't know. Can they please just disband the FBI? Just dismantle it? Just
one of these agencies? I mean, we've got the FBI, we got the CIA, we got the NSA, we got the Department of Homeland Security, we could go
and
on.
A bunch we don't know about.
Yeah, they just keep going. We don't need Secret Service. We got. I mean, it's like, really? Oh, these guys have jurisdiction over here. They have jurisdiction over here. These guys have jurisdiction there. But we share everything. So why does it matter?
We know that the NSA, the DHS, the FBI, the CIA are all organizations that we know of that can spy on us and utilize private data when it serves them. So, like Rand Paul said, we ought to be a lot more concerned about what the federal government can do to us than what Russia can do. I mean, Russia's kind of irrelevant. In fact, I heard, Randall, recently that Russia has one aircraft carrier, and it has to be towed around at times by a towboat.
Yeah, it's too old. It's too old. I mean, you look at the size and scope of military, and our military might is just so much bigger. I mean, that's why the United States is the world's police force, because we have so much, and we're so worried about cutting any of the funding. We added another 65, or we're talking about adding another 65 billion. Really? We already spend. We are the most protected country on the face of the planet. All you need to do is say, you know what? Let's stop spending so much. Let's bring these ships home. I mean, we can probably let people walk on ships off the shore, and not touch water all the way along the coast. We got enough of them.
We spend the equivalent of 15 next countries do on militarism. I mean, I saw a meme this week that says if you have 900 military installations around the world, that's not protecting our freedom. That's called an empire.
But here's what they're saying. Okay, let's go down the rabbit hole just a little bit. Part of why they justify this being defending the freedoms in America is because of the petrol dollar. Okay?
Petrol dollar.
Because if we just brought all our forces home and we didn't have that exercising control over in the Middle East, that influence, we weren't trying to control and change things over there, then maybe some of those countries would get a little uppity and maybe switch over to the euro or some other form of currency to nominate.
You mean like Syria?
Oil sales. Yeah, like Syria. And
they dumped the dollar. and they got bombs dumped on them.
Then what would that do? That would really mess up the economy here in the U.S. It would totally outstrip the power structure, because the power structure in Washington, D.C. is all about these fake dollars that the Fed prints. But without being nominated for oil sales, we would be totally out of a dollar right now. The dollar would be absolutely worthless.
Yeah, I think we're not the only ones who know this, Randall. And I think that the powers that be keep that thing going. And speaking of this is connected. Did you notice in the Reuters article, it said, Trump said, let's see. Sorry, I had it there.
Did you?
Oh, okay. Trump said he wasn't doing a good job, very simply, end quote, during a meeting with former Secretary of the State, Henry Kissinger, in the White House Oval Office. I just caught that little blurb. I'm like, Has that guy not died yet?
Nope, he's still kicking
Kissinger,
around.
man, this
he's
guy
the
is
guy
a
that set
cancer.
up the petrodollar.
He's the guy who set up the petrodollar. Yep.
So
Yeah, this guy.
interesting. Yeah, but
He's a vampire.
but that's the reason why they can say and even mean it some way that says that this is about our defense and spreading freedom, spreading our freedom, spreading our dollars, spreading our influence. And if we weren't doing that, then we'd go up in flames overnight. But it's not about
me.
It's not
You're
about
telling me that this firing of Comey is irrelevant, essentially?
Yes, absolutely. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
Everybody's getting upset about it, and they're talking about it like we're talking about it because it's something to fill the airwaves with, something to speculate about, something to get all riled up about. You know, like we were saying at the start, the Democrats and the Republicans, oh, this is happening because of Russia. No, it's happening because he's a dork. You know, it's just like, okay, come on, get real here for a minute, people. Get real.
Hey, and maybe Comey is actually a really good guy who tried to actually be fair and balanced, and that's why no one liked him.
Wait a second. You just sent in his job application to be a commentator on Fox and Friends. So, thank you, Comey, the new guy on Fox and Friends or Fox News or whatever. He's fair and balanced.
Oh boy. Yeah. Well, you'll see him pop up on the media. That's what these guys do, even when they're fired, like Oliver North, who helped to funnel weapons into another country, lied to the president about it. He ends up with his own show on Fox. So, you know, it just takes a little time. Go off the grid for a bit, write a book, sell a few thousand copies, get your own show on Fox News or on, any of the networks.
So tell us, what was really going on in those last couple weeks while you were in the FBI? Well, I'll tell you, Bruce, I was in there and it was not pretty. It was not pretty. And Trump wanted to fire me. And I told him you don't do that, but he did it anyway. And that's why we're in the mess we are today.
No. Paul Ryan said the president has the authority. He's within his authority to fire the FBI director. That's all he said. I was like, wow, Paul Ryan, there he is.
Now, I just want to know. Did Trump say, you're fired?
You're fired.
Did he call him up? You're fired. I just want to know.
Does
he fire him like he does on The Apprentice? Or is it like writing out a letter? We thank you for the time that you've spent at the agency.
Oh, he did.
We appreciate the flowers you sent.
I saw the letter.
Oh, did you?
It said we were releasing him or something like that. But anyway, if you're just joining us here on the Pyrocast, we spent the first section of the show talking about former FBI director Comey, who's been fired, and how it's pretty much irrelevant because it doesn't change anything in the police state that we live in. No. So, it's just something for Fox and the other side to talk about as ad nauseum. So, I think we've beaten that dead horse for a bit. We'll come back to it, I'm sure.
Definitely.
In another show. But Randall, we also had a few other topics. We wanted to talk about land issues, and we wanted to talk about weight, and we wanted to talk about gender. So where would you like to proceed at this point?
Well, just as an update, I think we talked, was it last show or 2 shows ago, we talked about the fact that Donald Trump said he was going to open up the monuments. They were going to review them and see if maybe they overstepped their bounds, creating such large monuments, especially the ones here in Utah. Utah delegation back in Washington, D.C. was super excited about this, as were most of the legislators here in Utah. And so apparently, we've got U.S. Interior Secretary Ryan Zinke. Yeah,
rhymes with Slinky. It's my favorite name to say right now.
Anyway, he's coming to Utah to have input on what went on. So this is your chance.
Here's the thing I want to say about our public lands and this Bears Ears National Monument. The only reason this is getting so much notoriety is because Utahns are actually awake now, and the majority of Utahns, according to polling data, are totally aggravated and against and opposed to this Bears Ears National Monument. But there are a few Indian tribes, and I've said this a few times. why would Native Americans say that they want to use the federal government to protect the land? Because the land has already been federally protected. So this is an actual new designation. But I think when Native Americans say this kind of thing, the only reason they say they support the federal government is for money, because they have had over 500 treaties broken with Native American tribes since the beginning of this republic. And if I was Native American, I assume I would hate the U.S. government. Now, they're in the weird position of getting money from the Fed, so it kind of does temper what they'll do. But there are plenty of Native Americans which are against Bears Ears, and I know this because I was at the Capitol in the state of Utah a couple months ago, and there were plenty of groups that are against it. However, there are other environmentalists who are for this. And I noticed that in the one-sided coverage, they always, in fact, in the article you sent me from U.S. News, it says that there are local business owners and residents who support the National Monument, and they plan to rally in its defense when Interior Secretary Zinke shows up.
Yeah.
There is plenty of business owners that are against it, and tribes, and all of the county commission down there is against it.
Yeah, totally. I mean, especially...
But you don't hear that.
Well, and that, I think, was talking about as well, specifically the Grand Staircase National Monument. Yeah. And so they're saying, yeah, there are businesses that are going to rally in its defense. Of course there are. It's been around. Right. It's been around for 20 years, right? And so there are people who come to visit, and so there are businesses that have started and been built up around the fact that we can't use this land for anything other than for people to come and oogle at it. For tourism. Yeah. So obviously there are businesses in the last 20 years that have started up there that are going to be like, yeah, we don't want it to go away. But how many more businesses and jobs were lost at the time that it was created just so many more. And yeah, everybody in Kanab, which is right at the gateway there at the southern part of it, 95%. I'll give a 5% margin for those who are in support of the National Monument. 95% will probably come out to talk with him and say, no, get rid of it. We don't want it here.
Oh, but you know what happened up at the state capitol? 95% of the people in that committee hearing were for Bears Ears, because they're the only ones who showed up. A bunch of people from Salt Lake area showed up to the Capitol.
Because people in Salt Lake know what to do with San Juan County.
Especially the people that I saw there.
Yeah.
Just kidding. Well, I'm serious. But
You're
here's
seriously
the thing.
kidding.
I'm seriously kidding, seriously. But we talked a few weeks ago about the fact, I don't think people realize that the U.S. government the feds control 550 million acres of land in the continental USA. And that is, I think we figured out 45% of the total land mass, 45 or 55%, somewhere in there, of the total land mass of the 48 states is controlled by the feds. And now you have these knuckleheads around us and all over the U.S., environmentalists and special interest groups that are like, oh, bring on more. And I always post this, Randall, what do you think of this? When I go into these forums to debate, I say, you are literally a danger to my family and me because you are empowering the feds to control more of our resources. You're making us all poorer, and you're increasing the police state that we live in because you're allowing them to come in and monitor and surveil everywhere that they are. I mean, we've had lots of reports of fake mobile phone towers, which are really surveillance devices monitoring Americans. We've had many states that have police forces who can do UV or radiation they can use to search through the walls of your home. Thankfully, the Supreme Court disagreed that. But the point is, when you support more federal land control, you support the police state, and you're a danger to free Americans. Is that blunt?
That's pretty blunt, dude.
It's true. It's true. You're a danger. If you're down with the federal masters that we have, you're a danger to my family, and that's where we've come to. So they don't ever respond to that because they probably are like, what? I don't even know what you're talking about.
Yeah, your numbers are just slightly off. It's about 28%.
Oh, 28%. That's it?
640 million of 2.27 billion acres.
Okay. Thank you for correcting me.
You're welcome. It just
But let's just stick with the numbers that I put forward. Sounds
still,
worse.
still, it's over a quarter of the land area.
Oh,
It's
that's
tied
right.
up for what?
28. It was almost 30%. I knew it was somewhere in there range. We get so many statistics on this program.
You know,
it's so hard to keep track of it.
We could go to Connecticut because the federal share there is only 0.4% of the state.
Yeah, I think back east of the Mississippi River, it's quite low.
That's the real tough part about all these lands issues is the people who are making a lot of these decisions or are in favor of securing these lands or making them monument designations or whatever, a whole bunch of them are back east, if not the majority of them are back east, and they don't experience what it's like to walk out into your backyard and say, "Oh, I can't go there because it's a monument all of a sudden." They have all the land is privately owned, or not all of it, but the majority of it, and there's this very small designation for federal installations, which is how it was supposed to be. But then they got out west and it all got screwed up, and then we're like, yeah, well, how do we fund education? We've got this vast state of Utah, and we've got all these kids. The ratio of school-age kids to adults is much higher here in Utah than it is in a lot of areas. They have big families, these Mormon families. They're huge. And so we're always talking about how Utah is the lowest funded per capita or per head in the schooling system because of that ratio. And the other thing that affects that is the amount of taxable land, because education is funded primarily with property taxes. And there's this very small area of land that we can tax because what size, with 65% of the state is controlled by federal hands, and we can't tax that. So it's an issue. It's an issue that we understand and fight here in the West about, because it's awful. I mean, Nevada is even worse. 84.5%. 84% of the state.
84% there, and we're around 70%. Well, and the other thing too is, as I look at the public land issue, I think where did Americans go that they were okay with this? Now, Utah's Enabling Act is interesting. I've read through it. It does say that the feds will hold title forever. That language is in there. However, it also says that the federal government has a responsibility to distribute, that's not the word disperse, it's something like that, to the people. And the precedent had been set in the eastern U.S., where very little of the land is controlled by the feds, was that they dispersed rather quickly when a state, entered the union. They would sell it off, to the state, people of the state quite quickly. But here we are in Utah. Our Enabling Act was signed in 1896, and here we are in 2017, and we are still 70% is controlled by the feds. They have not distributed that land as they were to the people of Utah. And so you've got these Utahns who are, let's get rid of the special interests for a minute, and let's just look at these normal Utahns who are deceived. You've got 1.9 million acres in Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, and Utahns are okay with that? You're just like, where are the independent Americans who understand federalism and understand what America was supposed to be as far as self-determination and that kind of thing? I'm really baffled that there are people that are so deceived by these federal land grabs.
Well, and those
federal retentions. Let's call it federal retention.
Well, and then there are those that are up in arms about people talking about the states taking over these lands or not having them be a national monument because they're worried. And this is a lot from the outdoor retail industry, because they're worried that all of a sudden those lands would not be available for us to hike in. Are you kidding me? You're crapping on me? No, that's not the case. You and I were just talking the other day about a possibility of saying, hey, let's take these lands given to private individuals, but incentivize them through lower taxes to make the land still open and available, even though they're privately owned. So you say, okay, this guy maybe likes to run a little bit of cattle on his land, but he gets a tax distinction because he allows people to come and hike on the trails. He keeps them open. He maintains them, whatever. And you may even have them
Right.
end up being more well maintained because you don't have this small agency with just a couple people trying to maintain millions of acres of trails. You have this one guy, he's got a couple hundred acres or 1,000 acres or whatever, and he takes care of his land because of the distinction it gives him. So it's like there are ways to do this, and people don't have to assume that they're just going to lose access to all the hikes that they could go on. I mean,
right. And I'm a big trail runner, so I understand that fear. And there's a big deficit, and I understand this too. There's a big deficit for people that are environmentalists, so-called tree huggers, and Utah's legislature. They don't trust the GOP, and they think they're going to distribute a lot of it to development. So I understand that. But there are actually politicians who have made efforts to come up with a cohesive plan, a comprehensive plan, to keep some for recreation, to keep some for preservation, and to keep some for development. There has to be a balanced approach to this. And I think Utahns could work it out. It's just that we're all divided into two camps. Nobody trusts the other side. And, quite frankly, we're deceived by the powers that be. And one thing unites left and right, Randall, in this. Both the left and right don't understand nullification or telling the feds no when they're violating the Constitution. And conservatives, they might mention it occasionally, but rarely, and they don't understand it. They don't have the guts to do it.
So when are we going to do it?
Because a lot of the people are dependent. We're going to do it right now. Federal government, no. I'm taking back Grand Staircase Escalante. I'm going to go build a house right now on it. I'm going to park my RV right in the middle of the national park and put a big sign that says no.
Well, that's one way. I'm not sure, how good that's going to do. But
come on, Randall. It's the best I got.
I'm behind you all the way.
I spent 20% of the freaking legislative session in the Capitol. It's the best I've got after that. That's all I got. You're going to end up like Ammon Bundy, locked in a prison for months. That's been a terrible thing. Okay, well, Randall, we've talked about Comey the homie, and we've talked about dirt.
Let's talk about fat.
Let's get fat up in this place.
Sounds good to me.
There was we like this site called intellectualtakeout.org. It's a good site. It's very intellectual. It has all kinds of things from economics to philosophy to family to religion, science, politics, blah, blah, blah. So we found this article that came out yesterday called How Government Makes Us Fatter. Obesity is a major health risk in the U.S., where 65% of adults are overweight. Now, I've looked at a lot of adults. I'm not sure if that's accurate. Those are government numbers, but we assume that a lot of people are fat, at least have a nice paunch. They always show like the 600-pound lady in these articles. And, there's a few people like that. So anyway, Americans spend $33 billion annually on weight loss products and services.
I just have to say, I love the bit that Jim Gaffigan, there's a plug for Jim Gaffigan, comedian, for those who don't know. Yeah. Anyway, he talks about fat people in commercials, and he's like, you always see the B-roll or whatnot that the news agencies will put on there where they show these people that are fat walking down the road, but you can't see their heads, so you don't know what their face is. But then he's like, but then the guy that's in it, he sees himself, and he knows it's him, because he's like, I was wearing that today,
Or they all signed a disclaimer and it's stock footage. They got paid some money. Or
probably not.
I've noticed that background where the heavy people are walking for those fat stories, obesity stories. What if they're all skinny actors in fat suits and they kind of blur it?
Maybe.
Think of what you could create wagging the dog, with this kind of thing. Anyway, I distracted us. I just think it's funny. You always see that same footage. In fact, I wish someone could do research and find out which footage or which news stories have the same fat footage in the background. But anyway, they said that 45% of women and 30% of men in the U.S. are trying to lose weight, and yet more Americans are out of shape than ever. I don't know how they calculate that. Anyway, they said 65% of adults are overweight, and the prevalence of obesity rose from 14.5% in 1980 to 30.5% today. Things like 10% of 2 to 5 year olds are obese. That's hard to know. 15% of 6 to 11 year olds and 15% to 12 to 19 year olds. Now, I have noticed a lot of kids are overweight, and that's always surprising to me because when I was a kid, I couldn't get enough to eat, and I never had a weight issue. So, anyway, so
how does the government make us fat?
How does the government? Well, the government in 1982 came out with that lovely food pyramid. Now, I sometimes chuckle at this food pyramid. I'm like, do people really take that thing seriously? But I think maybe as a social, subconsciously, maybe we did over the years, and we completely reduced our intake of fats, and we replaced that with what else? Carbohydrates, which basically become sugar.
Yep, and more sugar. And more sugar. And, I know we're going to get to this point, but are we going to talk about sugars, corn sugars?
Well, the article talks about a lot of things, like trans fat have basically been considered deadly now, and every company, food manufacturer, is getting it out of their product. The Atkins diet, where he encouraged people to go low on carbs or carb-free, has been mocked for decades. However, now that's back into vogue. So he basically outlines how much the nutrition industry has changed over the years. It has totally. But I'm getting something in my throat. I apologize. I must need some sugar. I don't know.
But there's some underlying policy moves that have made that happen beyond the food pyramid. I mean, you look at most of the statistics here were saying that those were in the poorer segment of society are those that, have the higher obesity rates. And you're like, okay, well, if they're poorer, then they can't afford as much food as someone who's wealthy, right? Well, I mean, there could be a couple different reasons for that, but I think one of them is the quality of food. It's a lot of the real cheap food is that's overly processed, overly sugared and sweetened, and and it tastes good. It's comfort food. If you're stressed out because it's hard to make bills or make ends meet and pay the bills, sometimes it feels really good to just down a soda or indulge in a chocolate bar or something like that. Little bit of escapism through food, and I think that happens. So I think that plays into these statistics. But
there's a but.
There's a big but.
There's an obese but here. Go ahead.
Well, but I think the big thing is one of the things that led to these sweet snacks getting so popular was the reduction of the cost of sugars in the United States.
Absolutely.
And
well, let me throw.
Go ahead.
Well, let me throw something on top of that. Farm subsidies, they use this term called subsidized diets. I love that, subsidized. Farm subsidies generally go to these 4 crops, and it's soy, corn, rice, and wheat. And all of these ingredients can be converted into cheap, highly processed foods. And this has resulted in 1980, about 12% of family budgets for food were spent on processed foods. Today, it's 23%. And that leads us into sugar. Tell us about sugar, Randall.
Well, I mean, today, the most prevalent sweetener, but it's receiving some kickback in a lot of different areas, but at this point in time, our blowback is high fructose corn syrup and corn syrup in general, which is not natural. It was only in, what was it, the late 60s,
You're saying
early
corn
70s?
syrup's not natural?
No.
High fructose corn syrup?
The only reason why we have it as a sweetener is because it was engineered. And it was engineered, I believe, because the government had incentivized corn production to such a great extent that they're like, okay, what do we do with all this corn? Well, they're like, okay, well, we can make ethanol with it. Let's do ethanol. We'll be all clean.
Food into fuel.
Yeah, let's take this corn and, oh, wait, we can make a sweetener out of it. It's totally unnatural, but we'll do it. And it totally hurt these other industries. which I will talk about as well if you'd like.
Well, let me talk about corn real quick. I know some about corn from my own life. This is true story time too.
Nice. Let me pull up a pillow.
I was running a big turkey farm, sending about 1 million pounds of meat to market over a 3.5 year period. We feed the turkeys corn. And I watched the commodity prices skyrocket at times throughout that 3.5 years. I would go pick up a 9-ton load of feed, which at one point was $3,500, and that would last like 3 or 4 days. Then at other times it would be at $1,200 to $1,500. So that was the way it would go. And you had a hard time budgeting for the year and asking, because you had to have the banks extend your loans and those kinds of things. So the corn subsidies that were going to the Midwest farmers for ethanol and for all of this crap food, or junk food, would make the corn that was being fed to livestock back here in the West just skyrocket. They were getting like a 45-cent subsidy on their corn production to go to ethanol and these other things. And so we were getting hosed as farmers in the West. And so we were hating the farmers in the West as farmers hating the farmers in the Midwest as farmers in the West. So
now weren't
are you following
farmers,
that?
Weren't the turkey farmers getting their own subsidies though?
They were getting their own subsidies.
So is that the way the government justifies it? Say, hey, we're going to take away some of this corn. We're going to subsidize it so we make a whole bunch more of it. But we know that may make it harder for you to get some. So we're going to give you some subsidies so you can feel okay about yourself too.
Well, that's the problem, is that most of those subsidies go to these big agricorps, and these small cooperatives or individual farmers, they really just don't exist. In fact, I think it's about a 3% number now of all farming is done by owner-owned farms. I mean, 95% or higher, I've heard, is all agricorps and is conglomerates. And so that I saw it on the ground what the price and the subsidies for corn did to farmers who were trying to use it for their livestock. So anyway, going back to the high fructose corn syrup, but wait, it gets worse.
Yeah, well...
Didn't you read one time about beet sugar farmers being put out of business because of this?
Well, here in Utah, especially in the western states, it wasn't favorable to grow sugarcane very much, which, is one of the regular cane sugar. People love cane sugar, right?
Sure.
Anyway, so around the turn of the century, 1900s, a little bit past that, it became very popular to grow sugar beets and then create sugar from the sugar beets. And there was a point in time where the local sugar beet farmers got some intervention from the Department of Agriculture back in Washington, D.C. to get some subsidies or whatnot, some help, because they couldn't totally compete with the price that CNH, California and Hawaii, cane sugar could be produced, and they wanted to stay in business, so they got some help from the federal government. And anyway, so the beet sugar kept going, and it was going good until the government decided to pick another winner and subsidize corn syrup. And when that really hit it hard, then the sugar beet industry in Utah and Idaho and that general area just kind of fizzled and went away almost entirely. And it was big business prior to that. But so here you had the use of government to protect this industry from the cheaper cane sugar that was coming from Hawaii and California. And then the government just decides, hey, we have another favorite. We're going to invite them over for dinner and give them special treats. And so the corn industry won out and killed the sugar beet industry in Utah and Idaho. I think I love that story.
Isn't that crazy?
I love that story because it's like it just illustrates how government doesn't care about you. Government has an agenda today, and they're going to fulfill it. And maybe you'll be a useful pawn in that game, and you can help perpetuate their program. You can help justify their program, but as soon as they're done with you, you're dead. Just give it up. You're dead.
Well,
and they don't care.
here's one thing that I'm always shocked by. Like, well, as far as sugar goes, I did find one thing that was interesting. It said that once high fructose corn syrup made its way into previously unsweetened foods, like tomato sauce, those kinds of things, pasta sauce, it said the average American eats 41.5 pounds of high fructose corn syrup per year, financed by U.S. corn subsidies. And that's in addition to the 29 pounds of traditional sugar that the USDA reports we eat on average. So think about that. Almost double the amount of food that people eat nowadays is filled with high fructose corn syrup compared to traditional sugar.
It's a cheap filler, and it's addictive.
Cheap in what way? Between the subsidies going out by the billions to the farming industry in these massive farm bills, and then the health care costs, I'll bet if you could take apples to apples and compare all of the variables, we have lost so much money on this cheap food source.
But as far as getting it into the food, it's cheaper than a lot of the things that they have to manufacture with because it's subsidized. So that's what they look at as a means to justify saying, oh yeah, let's put corn syrup in. Not only will it be cheaper than some of the other, like in tomato sauce, not only will it be cheaper than, let's say, tomatoes that we're putting in the tomato sauce, but it'll also make, because it's sweet, it'll make it more addictive. And that's exactly what we see. That's the behavior. That's why one of the fundamental reasons why we have this obesity epidemic is because they become very addictive foods, and they're comfort foods. People go to them. And so it's like, I'm just I'm eating my feelings, and they want more and more and more. More and more.
Well, I saw this show with this diet expert, and he'd come into people's houses and do like intervention with them to help them lose weight because they were, grossly obese and were in danger of health issues, dying, that kind of thing. So what he did was the first thing, he emptied the freezer and the fridge, and he noticed something. He'd spread it all out, and it would be stacked. I mean, clear up, but all of the food and the branding was brown, red, and orange colors, the golden fried color, everything. He says, you notice that there is a psychological trigger that these companies have realized if they stay in the brown and red spectrum, it just gets us to take these processed food. Another thing, Randall, I discovered while we've been on is that according to a USDA food industry critic, says, quote, almost $300 billion, that's with a B, of government subsidies support an agriculture industry that focuses on quantity, not quality, on producing cheap sugars and fats from corn and soy that fuel both hunger and obesity. So he says this, you can fill up on 1,200 calories of cookies or potato chips for $1, but you'll only get 250 calories from carrots for that same dollar. If you were hungry, what would you buy? So that the poison becomes a matter of, do we get full or do we get healthy and have to spend more money? It's obviously you're going for the cheaper route because, and I got to say, it's also a matter of probably of, I don't want to say intelligence, but I mean, if you're born into a culture where that's just normal, right, that's what you're going to go with. I mean, on this show, we're always trying to overcome the biases that we have and what we learn. And sometimes I learned that, hey, everything I was taught in this specific thing growing up and from society was completely wrong. I had no idea. And so I feel empathy for these people that are stuck in poverty, but also in this cycle of, well, I mean, you look at a lot of people that are overweight, and it's just like, you are killing yourself with food, just slower than a regular illicit drug. This is a drug. Yeah. It just will keep you alive for a long time.
You're eating yourself to death. Stop it.
It's an ironic thing. You're eating yourself to death. I love that.
I mean, you wouldn't start eating your fingers, but I mean, essentially that's what you're doing. But it's sad because it tastes so good. It's delicious. It's the delicious death, and everybody wants it. Everybody wants some.
Well, there's this great article in the Deseret News called "The Pain of Calorie-Rich Malnutrition in the United States," and I think we are there's never been a nation in this situation where food was not an issue. I think some civilizations at times, Rome and others, had periods where, there was prosperity generally and where the working class could essentially stop struggling. But we've
taken it to a new level.
You could eat 5,000 calories a day and spend relatively little compared to any place in the world, compared to any nation. You could spend $5,000 or 5,000 calories a day and not break the bank at all. Like I know when I was at Disneyland, we went to the Blue Bayou, I think it is, and we bought the Monte Cristo sandwich. And this thing had ham and jam and cheese and all this, 85 calories in one sandwich. It's just only in America can you, like you said, eat yourself to death here. It's such an abundance. And so it's like, I don't know. I mean, Oreos have been around for 100 years, but they didn't have trans fat or high fructose corn syrup 100 years ago.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well,
and they probably cost a lot more of your income, too, to be honest.
Right.
Because we paid for value back then.
We did. And they were not so ubiquitous as they are today. Now they're everywhere, and they're all full of that crappy sugar. Now, but we've seen a little bit of a resurgence. Now you go to buy soft drinks or you buy different foods, and they're labeled real cane sugar. This is, or like they got their Pepsi had their throwback sodas recently
with the real sugar.
Real sugar. Wow, that's a selling point, because we're no longer high fructose corn syrup. We're actual real sugar, and they cost more because they do. Real sugar costs more. But, I'll take an ounce of real sugar over an ounce of high fructose corn syrup any day. Have
you drunk those throwback sodas?
No.
I have. I've actually taken the high fructose corn, the one we're used to, and the throwback. The flavor is better with the real sugar. I kid you not. My brother, who is addicted to Dr. Pepper, he'll admit it. He only gets the real sugar kind because there's such a difference in that. And I got to say, as we're wrapping up here, one of the things I hate to see the most on any package, and I usually won't eat, if it says unbleached, enriched flour, whole wheat. I hate that because I know that is going to be sludge in my dietary tract. Like that is going to collect in my intestines. So that and high fructose corn syrup, I will not consume that either. Those are the two things when I see, I'm just like, and another thing, carrageenan, and I'm not even going to get into, but that's in most of your dairy products to make them smoother and to last longer on a shelf. Carrageenan is not good for you. So there's a lot of things. But anyway, avoid high fructose corn syrup, reduce sugar to as low as you can, and you'll probably be all right.
And maybe do some exercise. Go run, ride a bike, just even a walk. Raise that heart rate a little bit. Burn off some of those calories.
There's a pill for that.
If you can't enter the revolution in any other means, at least rebel against the government's programs and get off your butt and go for a walk. Get up and throw the Frisbee with your kids. Pass the football. I don't know. I don't care what it is you do, but this is one way where you can say, you know what? I'm sick and tired of this, and I'm not going to take it anymore. You can get off your butt and go work out, and that's the best, easiest way to rebel against government waste. Do it now.
Yeah. Well,
the
U.S. government needs weak, out of shape, and unhealthy people to continue the way it is. And so that is a huge portion of us being self-reliant and self-determinant is that we get in shape, because then we'll make healthier choices, and those subsidies will eventually have to end because nobody's buying the stuff.
Yeah, we just
have to take a stand.
It's the perfect time. Stand up! Stand up! Thank you for joining us for the Pyrolitical Pyrocast this Wednesday, the 10th of May. It's May already. Anyway.
And if you've enjoyed what you've heard, go over and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Pyrolitical Live, friends. Get over there.
Take care. Bye.